Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm sure that everyone is muted and I'm sure you can hear me. We're just trying to see if we can get more people in, but I want to welcome everyone to tonight's edition of another, topic we're going to discuss, which is very important, in tackling domestic violence. I want to thank everyone for joining. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that your time tonight will not be wasted because we're going to learn a lot, that has to do with mental health, which is a topic that I think everyone needs to know about. So my name is Busayo Rotimi Emmanuel. And of course, a member, yes, of Touch Link. And in case you're just joining us, in case you don't know what Touch Link stands for, Touch Link's mission is to provide support to victims of domestic violence, females, males. We know today that not only females are victims of domestic violence, so we provide support to females, males, and the children involved, in domestic violence. And we achieve this through our interventions, crisis management programs, advice. We give advice, and we have a lot of programs to help, cushion the effect of domestic violence, and of course to help, let me use the word, to help rescue people who are going through or who might have experienced domestic violence. And we all know that this is the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we've been doing programs. Can you hear me? I'm sure we all can hear me, right? So yeah. We have programs, that we've been doing to raise more awareness concerning domestic violence. We've had living with the domestic violence. We've had financial freedom, which Sister Dolakbo, anchored. We've had sexual assault. People don't know that another form of domestic violence is sexual assault. And we have so many other topics that we would like to discuss. And today we're discussing mental health and domestic violence. And, when we talk about mental health, people think mental health is a topic that a lot of people shy away from. And I relate because, sometimes culturally, sometimes, religion, people shy away from mental health. But it is a topic that we really need to discuss so we can be informed and we can, have resources as to what mental health stands from. Let me tell you that mental health, according to my research, is different from mental illness. Some people would be like, oh, mental health. No, I'm not mad, so I don't want to know. So tonight we have someone who would shed more light on that. And of course, we know that mental health affects so many areas of our lives. It affects, how we function at work, our productivity, our social life, emotional life. And you can imagine someone going through domestic violence, someone who has experienced it, it's a lot of mental issues, that the person is going through. And we really want to shed more light on how to know you have mental issues, what do you do, the causes, the cure, and the signs to look out for. But listen, I'm not a professional in this field. I'm just here to anchor the program. And but I wanted to raise an awareness. I want us all to go to the website. Our website is touchlink.org. Once you click TouchLink on Google, it will bring out the website. You can go there to support. You can go there, to register and spread the news, because it's a good job to raise awareness against domestic violence. All right. So one thing before I call on the speaker tonight, I'll tell you that in the course of a lifetime, not everyone will experience a mental illness. People get sick, right? So that's how mental illness is, but not everyone would experience mental illness, but everyone will struggle or have a challenge with their mental health or mental well-being. That's why we really have to know, and we have to differentiate between mental illness and mental health. And tonight, to do justice to that, it's someone that I really respect, someone that is doing a lot in this field. She has achieved so much. One thing I like about TouchLink is that if we are discussing any issue, we bring someone who has a say in the field. And tonight, we are so lucky to have someone who began a career in telemetry before transferring to intensive care units. She has ultimately found a passion in the area of psychiatry. She specializes in psychiatric mental health. She has a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Adfield University, and completed a Master's of Science in Nursing from another university in the US. This person, she has a true calling for helping others, and also she enjoys educating people about mental illness and different services that are available to begin or continue the treatment. So she's currently employed. She works in one of the New Jersey's based health system in psychiatric units. She diagnoses, she treats, and she counsels patients. And of course, tonight, by the time you hear from her, I'm sure you would have a lot of information to even become become someone who has a say in the field. It is always good to have a little idea about everything. So tonight, I'm sure that you would really learn a lot from this person I'm talking about. I'm talking about no other person but Dr. Brenda Adeogun. She has a lot of MP and all these accolades to her name, so I don't want to confuse it, but you just heard me read her biography. So help me with clap in your chat, and don't forget, this is a very, very conversational program. Yeah, right. So if you have questions when she's talking, please just go to the chat area and type in your question. You can raise your hand also, and when I see you, I'll call you to ask your question. I want it to be as conversational as possible. She would answer all your questions tonight, and she has a lot of time to deal with that. So, without much ado, help me welcome Dr. Brenda A. Adeogun. Dr. Brenda, thank you for joining, and over to you.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Well, I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I currently work at Barnabas Behavioral. I work for St. Barnabas in Jersey and Toms River. And I do work on a voluntary unit. I see dual patients, meaning I see mental illness and substance abuse. And in that, I see so many different people, so many walks of life, young, old, suffering and dealing with a number of illnesses. And I recently actually started my own private practice on the side. So that is something else that I'm doing. In that I just took the leap of faith, at the beginning of this year, and I started my own practice, and it just it's building and it's growing, and I'm just grateful to be doing what I love, and that's talking and helping people. So we'll talk about mental health. And before I start, I'll just kind of say that when I initially started my practice, really, first I took it to God, and I made sure that I got what He wanted for me to do. And there was one verse in the Bible that I used to start, and it was Romans 12:2, and it talks about transformation beginning with the renewal of our minds. And with that, I was just like, this is it. Like, mental health, that's it. That's what I need to do. That's what I need to help people know, that we can do anything once we start with our minds. So I'm going to put up a PowerPoint and just kind of go through mental illness, especially when it comes to domestic violence. That is something that is really, it's not talked about because there's lots of stigma behind it, but I'm hoping that we can all, talk about it, be able to have conversations with our friends, coworkers, family, just so that we are more aware of how to help somebody who might be struggling or point them in the right direction. So I'm just gonna share my screen.
Don't forget, if you have questions, please just put it in the chat box, and I'll jot them down so we can ask her along the line.
Yes, and please, I want this to be interactive. I want us to talk. So. First, I just kind of wanted to define what mental illness was. And mental illness are health conditions involving changes in our emotion, thinking, and behavior. Every day, what we do daily, our emotions, thinking, behavior, this is who we are. And when there's a mental illness, there's a change in our emotion, there's a change in our behavior, there's a change in our thinking. And I have some statistics here where it says 1 in 5. So, 1 in 5 people is a lot. If you're in a room of 100 people, that's at least 20 people there who are dealing with mental illness. That's at your job. That's when you go to the supermarket. That's at the mall. Just think that 1 in 5 people are suffering with some form of mental illness. 1 in 24 is a serious mental illness, and then 1 in 12 is a serious substance use disorder. That's our marijuana, our alcohol abuse, heroin, cocaine, any substance. And then I just wanted to add that, all these things are treatable, especially when you seek help. There is nothing that cannot be fixed, changed. All these things are treatable. Let me go to the next one. Domestic violence, I have some statistics here that show 7 million women and 5.5 million experience physical violence, stalking, rape by an intimate partner. So there's 333 million people in the United States. And if 7 million people, 7 million women and 5 million men are experiencing some form of domestic violence, that is a good, at least 4 or 5% of the population that are experiencing some form of domestic violence. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. So this session that we're doing now is an hour. So in this hour, 1,200 people will be abused physically, emotionally, in some form of domestic violence. So that's 1,200 people in an hour. And there's 24 hours in a day. That's a lot. 1 in 4 men and 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience. And I always kind of look at this, and it reminds us that there's men that are dealing with domestic violence as well. It's not just women. Studies suggest that there are relationships between intimate partner violence and depression and suicide behavior. So we'll definitely start getting into the mental illness aspects of domestic violence. There's a vast majority of mental illnesses, but I really just want to focus on depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Those are the 3 that you will see primarily in substance use disorder. Domestic violence. There are so many other mental illnesses: bipolar, schizophrenia, psychosis. those are, we don't even have enough time. So, but depression, anxiety, PTSD are the main illnesses that individuals who suffer with mental domestic violence will suffer with. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a psychiatric disorder that occurs when people experience or witness traumatic events, like a natural disaster, serious accident, war, abuse. Okay, so it's almost inevitable that an individual who has mental illness will deal with some form of PTSD. If you're being emotionally, physically, any form of abuse, you will have some form of post-traumatic stress disorder, and there is treatment for this. Symptoms of PTSD is re-experiencing, avoiding, numbing, hyperarousal, cognitive and mood changes. So hyperarousal, somebody touches you on your shoulder, you jump. Your mood changes. Of course, if somebody is abusing you, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be down. You're going to be depressed. You might be anxious. You might avoid people, family, friends. You might not go to work if you have injuries that are visible to you. You'll lie. You'll do many things that are not that will cause you to have trauma or continuously relive the trauma, especially if you're living in the home. And then there's generalized anxiety and panic disorders, which are separate but the same. So I'll talk about generalized anxiety. Generalized anxiety is characterized by persistent excessive worry about a number of things. People with generalized anxiety anticipate disasters, money issues, health, family, work. So an individual who is in a domestic violence situation, if they're being abused financially, emotionally, can you imagine if they have children? They're constantly worried. And a lot of times some women stay in these situations because of their anxiety. They're constantly worried about, will my kids have food? I'm staying with this person because I want to make sure that they have a roof over their head. Or I have to be with this person. I don't have my own car. I don't have my own money. He's the breadwinner. She's the breadwinner. So that's when it leads to generalized anxiety. You're constantly worried. And anxiety is not just manifests itself in our thoughts. A lot of times they are physical. We get headaches, we get dry mouth, dizzy, stomach aches, headaches. A lot of times people go to their primary care doctors with these illnesses, and they do all these workups, they do tests, they do exams, and there's nothing that's founded. And a lot of times it's not physical, it's more mental. It's the anxiety, it's excessive worry, it's the lack of sleep, the feeling short of breath. A lot of people come to the emergency room as if they're having heart attacks because they're so anxious. And it's not a heart attack, it's anxiety. So it's really important to understand the difference between a heart attack and anxiety. You know, it ends up people in the emergency room. So that's important. And there's also psychological symptoms. You're restless, you feel on the edge, you can't focus, you're angry, you're irritable. You know, that coworker that might be snapping at you all the time, maybe they're not as miserable as you think. Maybe they're dealing with some form of anxiety that gets them on the edge and irritable. So that's another symptom. And then there's panic disorder, which is when you experience repeated episodes of intense fear by physical symptoms that include chest pain, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, dizziness, abdominal distress. Like I said, they mimic a heart attack. It's as if you are about to pass out. Some people do pass out when they have these panic attacks. They can't breathe, they can't think, they have tunnel vision, they can't see. And they feel as though they're experiencing some form of life-threatening condition. Racing hearts, feeling weak, faint, dizzy, numbness and tingling, the sense of terror, impending doom, sweatiness, difficulty breathing, loss of control. These are basic symptoms of panic attacks. And everybody who experiences panic attacks will have what their individual experience, but these are some basic symptoms. And last but not least, I will talk about depression. And depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. There's major depression, or called clinical depression. It affects how you feel, how you think, behave. It leads to a variety of emotional and physical problems. You may have trouble doing normal day-to-day things. There's many people who suffer with depression, and you might go to their home and you see like things are unkept. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this person is just so dirty, or this is disgusting. And it's not that they don't want to have a clean home. It's because their mood is so down and depressed that they cannot physically get up and clean. They can't physically get up and shower. I had somebody recently who didn't brush their teeth because they physically could not get up and do it. They didn't have the strength. Some symptoms of depression are feeling sad, empty, helpless, hopeless, guilty, moving slow, fatigued. You're a social person, and then all of a sudden you stop talking to your family and friends. You have difficulties concentrating. You are somebody who used to work and you completed all your tasks at your job, and now you can't even get through the beginning of your morning. You can't sleep, you can't eat. Some people lose weight, some people gain weight. And they manifest themselves in physical symptoms, headaches, cramps, abdominal symptoms. Your stomach hurts, you have diarrhea, or you can't use the restroom, aches and pains. And worse are when you have suicidal thoughts, and that's when you want to end your life. Suicide is when you want to direct violence towards yourself to end your life, and or die because of whatever actions you might inflict on yourself. And suicide warning signs could be talking about wanting to die, feeling empty, being depressed, suffering with PTSD, anxiety, chronic pain, planning or looking for ways to kill yourself, feeling guilt or shame, withdrawing from your family or friends, consuming excessive amounts of drugs, feeling as though you're a burden to your family and your friends, and unbearable pain, again, both physical and emotional pain. When people experience their other suicide warnings could be giving away important possessions. When somebody's all of a sudden giving away something that is really valuable to them, heirloom, a family heirloom, saying goodbye. We live in the day of age of social media. A lot of people post their goodbye messages on Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, taking risks. They don't care. They drive on the parkway. They're going Parkway South. They're driving the opposite direction. These risky behaviors are signs somebody may have an impending thought of suicide. And with all these things, there is treatment. Nobody has to deal with this alone. There's so many resources out there for people who are suffering with mental illness. There's therapy, medication, hospitals if it's needed, peer support like TouchLink, having people that you can connect with who understand, any form of treatment, self-help planning, case management. There is support and treatment for your mental illness. There's physical and mental impacts of domestic violence. And many people who suffer with domestic violence suffer with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. These things are almost, like I said in the beginning, they're almost inevitable. And a lot of people who suffer with, who have been abused can have the suicidal thoughts and the depressed behavior. So it's really important that we are mindful and cautious of when we are taking and treating people who are dealing with domestic violence. It's really important to prioritize your mental health. And I said this in the beginning about transformation beginning with the renewing of our minds, right? If we decide that we want to do something, it starts with a thought. So we have to be mindful of how we speak to ourselves, right? I put this mantra here: ultimately, I can only control myself. A lot of people with mental illness not mental illness, but domestic violence, they blame themselves for the abuse that they're getting. And it's never your fault for somebody inflicting injuries to you, to your family, whether it's physical, emotional, it's never your fault. And how we speak to ourselves and being mindful of how we speak to ourselves is very important. And being okay with not being okay. If we know that we're not okay, that's the first step. We are now open to receiving a form of treatment, therapy, advice, leaving the situation if that's what's needed. You are now, you know you're not okay, and then you then say, okay, what's the next step? Getting organized, cleaning your space, finances. We spoke on, I believe, Monday about having the thought to want to now save $1,000, and you open up your bank account and you see the $1,000 and you're like, okay, great. Like now I'm feeling better. You feel like you're working towards a goal. Setting boundaries. That is important. We have to prioritize our mental health by setting boundaries, saying no. It's okay to say no. If you cannot, people bite off more than they can chew all the time. It's important to say no. I can't come. I can't do it. You can't have my money. Whatever the case is, you should learn to set boundaries, healthy boundaries. Your boss wants you to stay and work overtime, but your kids have a football game that day and you want to be there. No, I cannot work. I have to see my kids' football game. Setting boundaries, healthy boundaries for yourself. Establishing a routine. I put detoxing from the news and social media because sometimes we get so, our phones are glued to our hands. We wake up in the morning and we start the day off with Facebook, and we see all these horrible things. And how could you start your day with that? Prioritizing meditation, surrounding yourself with positive people. They say birds of a feather flock together. If you're around a bunch of negative people, negative energy, that's not going to be good for your mental health. Self-care, and I'll talk more about that later. Exercising and getting a therapist or a counselor. That could be anybody, that could be in any form. That could be, a clergy member, somebody in your church, somebody in your religious organization. It could be actually seeking a therapist, a professional help. It could be any of those things. And I spoke in the beginning about mental health being, I would say, stigmatized, and people not really wanting to get treatment due to the negative attitudes and discrimination against people who suffer with an illness. I assure you that, like I said in the beginning, 1 in 5, that's a small room of people. That's your office building, that's your job, that's your supermarket. There are so many people who are suffering, and they're suffering in silence. So I encourage people to get help. There's nothing wrong with getting help. We all have to work together to change our attitudes towards mental health. Overcoming stigma by getting treatment. Don't isolate, educate yourself, join a support group, and speaking against the stigma, changing the narrative. There's nobody in your village that's doing this to you. People, have these, somebody's sad and they say things like, oh, someone in my village is holding me. It's not that. We have to overcome the stigma of mental illness. And I really need people to implement self-care. Whether or not we're dealing with a mental illness or not, self-care is so important for ourselves. And it's all about us, especially if you're dealing with a domestic violence situation. You've been abused, you've been battered, you've been put down, and it's time to now take care of you. You are not good to anybody if you are not good for yourself. And that's super important, to take care of yourself and implementing self-care. And on Saturday, there's going to be a big discussion about self-care. So I'm just going to kind of glaze over it and just making sure that we're deliberately taking care of our mental health, our emotions, our physical health. These things are important. And there's so many things you could do to take care of your self-care: sleeping well, nutrition, working out, making sure you go to a doctor for a regular checkup. Relaxing, and whatever that means for you. If that means you sleep in on a Saturday for an hour more, and that's your self-care, that's your you time. Meditating, praying, these are self-care, things for your self-care. And mental health resources. I know people feel like they can't get a therapist or they can't find people who they can speak with. There's so many ways. You can go through your insurance provider. Everyone, if you don't, even if you have insurance, you can go through your insurance provider. There's lists of many therapists on Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare. If you check out the website, there's always a list. If you do find a therapist and you don't have insurance, a lot of therapists work on what we call sliding scales, where you know, if you only make $1 a day, they will treat you based off how much you can afford to pay. College kids, elementary school kids, high school kids, your school has a counselors. They're there for you for free. Pro bono, there's a lot of therapists who do pro bono work, free work. Online services, if you can afford it, there's things like Talkspace, BetterHelp, where you could be in the comfort of your own home and you can just open up your smartphone or your laptop or your whatever device you have. And your religious organization, there's always clergy, a pastor, somebody who is willing to talk to you and talk you through whatever it is that you're dealing with. Stop sharing. So I know I said a lot, and I'm sure you know, people have questions or comments. I know that mental illness is not really, you know, I think more in the community and the world, people are more talking about it more, but there's still a lot of stigma against people who are suffering with any form of mental illness, especially when it comes to depression, PTSD, anxiety. People like to downplay it or just tell you to get over it, or you'll be better, just go, you know, go shake it off. And sometimes it's not that easy. So just being aware of different, you know, symptoms or things to look for can be helpful in somebody treating their mental illness, or even being kind to somebody who might be suffering with a mental illness, so that you're more aware of what they may or may not be going through. So if you have any questions, concerns.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Brenda. Wow, that was very insightful, and I'm sure that, you know, I've been able to take notes. I've been able to learn a lot about mental illness, you know, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and one way or the other, you know, someone around us might be suffering from this. You know, the floor is open for questions. I know that a lot of people have questions they might want to ask, but let me kick off. You know what I noticed? Let me tell us again that TouchLink is out, you know, to hold you by the hands. You might have someone, it might not even be you. You might be here for someone, you know, who is going through domestic violence and, of course, is having symptoms of mental health. You know, you can actually reach out to TouchLink. Go to www.touchlink.org. They would not stigmatize you. They will not talk about you, you know, to anybody. They would not broadcast your issue. You know, we have professionals to deal with whatever you might be going through. TouchLink is just, you know, I see it as God sent. Now, going to Dr. Brenda, I have a couple questions. Let me just, you know, keep it rolling so I can spark up some more question in other people's mind. Now, before I ask my question, talking about mental health, did you actually know, I'm talking to everyone now, did you know that sometimes even the partner who is you know, being violent against you might even be suffering from domestic violence? You might be suffering from mental health, I beg your pardon. Because I was just thinking that, you know what, maybe the man or the woman who is even who is violent against a partner might be suffering from domestic violence. And in that case, Dr. Brenda, what do you think one should do? Because we might have someone who is trying to say, oh, okay, just advise us what to do, if you can put that down. Also, is it hereditary? Because we know that people say, oh, before you marry someone, go check their family tree and see that, you know, they don't have mental illness, you know, and yeah. So is it hereditary? And so those are my two questions for now. Please, if you have questions, you can, if you want to voice out your questions, raise up your hand in the chat on your profile, or just write your questions in the chat box. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Brenda.
Okay, so the first question you asked, well, actually, I'm talking about the second question first, hereditary. So yes, there are certain things that, of course, are genetics, right? They're inevitable, you know, you pass things down, but our environmental factors play a huge role in what happens to us. Especially when it comes to domestic violence, right? A lot of people are people who are abusers tend to have been abused. And you obviously have to be dealing with some form of illness to, raise your hand to somebody. It's manipulative behavior. We talked, I think, a week or two ago about gaslighting and personality disorders, narcissistic personality. Those things are forms of mental illness. However, for the not for the victims, but for the people who are portraying the violence, it's really inexcusable, right? I mean, unfortunately, there's no excuse to abuse somebody, but these people themselves are sick as well. They're dealing with their own form of mental illness. Whether it is substance abuse, a lot of times, people are abusing substances where they lose all their inhibition. Personality disorders, where they're narcissistic personalities, they will abuse an individual and then say sorry or the next day, or they financially abuse people. They try and take control over the family in every way they can. They are suffering with some form of mental illness, but it's inexcusable, and those individuals need to get help. And I hope that they're open to receiving help. And as far as it being genetic, of course, it is some things are genetic. They're genetically predisposed. Environmental factors take effect. If you are born in poverty, or if you're witnessing domestic violence as a child, sometimes those things manifest into other things. But it's important to have early intervention for children if they are witnessing domestic violence. That's why I mentioned schools having counselors and stuff like that, or churches, services in a church if you can't afford it, or if you have insurance, getting your children help in any way. And just making sure that, you prevent things from getting worse. Prevention is better than cure.
Well, thank you very much. I see that there's nobody has questions. Okay. I'll shoot another question at you, Dr. Brenda. Now, I know you talked about, anxiety, and this is what people experience, especially with the advent of, COVID. People are very anxious. Like, a lot of people are anxious. Everybody's anxious. But I wanted to ask this question. What is the difference between mental health and overreacting? Do you get my question? Like, what is the difference? How do you know if you are overreacting or you really need to see a doctor? So if my partner is doing this, how do I know if he needs to seek help or is just overreacting?
I think that, it's hard to say, right? Like, I always tell, like, when I'm talking to people, I always say, like, your trauma or whatever you're experiencing is yours. So if I bump my foot on the table and I think that this is the worst, I'm screaming, I'm shouting, I'm in pain, that's my reaction to the pain. It's what I say it is. So somebody can't tell me that I'm overreacting or I am not valid in what I'm feeling, because they're all individualized. Somebody can't tell me that if I hit my toe on the table, I shouldn't cry. If I say I'm hurt, that means that I'm hurt. And that's where it ends, So there's really no overreacting. It's what you say, it's what you feel, it's what you say it is. So there's no overreacting.
Okay. Thank you. I have a question. Someone says, is abuse caused by mental health issues? And just to add to that, another person said, how can we approach a loved one who is going through withdrawal symptoms and refusing to acknowledge domestic abuse?
Okay.
So those are two questions.
Yeah. Okay. So I see the question here. I'm not sure what they mean by withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawals from what?
Yeah, I think I understand. Like, they don't want to talk to you. They want to be alone. They don't want to. They call it. They don't want to own up to it. Like, they're living in denial. Maybe that's what the person means.
I'll always refer to transformation beginning with the renewal of our minds, right? If we are ready to change something in our minds, that's where it starts. And it's frustrating with people who are in domestic violence situations sometimes, because they're in this abusive situation and you know, as an outsider looking in, like, please get out. It doesn't look good. You're abused, you're battered, but until that person is ready, they're not gonna seek the change. There's times that, and I've seen this in working in the hospital, I've set people up, we send them to a domestic violence shelter, they're away from their abuser, and then in the shelter, they get kicked out because they call their abuser to come back and they wanna go home because it's a fear, it's the anxiety, like, I can't afford my food. I can't afford to take care of myself. This person is taking care of me. And now I'm being put in a place where I have nothing. So they wear their options and they say, I'd rather go back home because at least I know I had a roof over my head. At least I knew I had my Dove soap and I had my Crest toothpaste. They're comfortable in that situation. And until somebody is truly ready to get out, that's when they will get out. And it has to be them. You could always encourage them. You could always pray for them. But until they are ready to change, that transformation in their mind has to start first.
Wow. So that means that everyone helps only those who help themselves. But of course, yeah, that's why we have TouchLink. You can actually reach out to TouchLink. If you have someone reach out to TouchLink, talk to us about it. Just go to the website. You can get resources, share with them. Yeah, you can keep sharing resources with them so they can be aware that we are always here to help. There was a long question here, Dr. Brenda, which I would want us to read together, but I'll read it so, you can also go along. Dr. Brenda, can you please tell us more about depression? Do different people experience depression differently, such that one person may be depressed and feeling empty inside, but still pursuing their core motivation? The one thing they feel they need in order to exist. But besides that, they just feel empty and still have other symptoms of depression, like suicidal thoughts, feeling empty and lonely, etc. Meanwhile, someone else may be unable to get out of bed at all. Okay, so I think this question means maybe people handle depression differently. So this person is trying to ask you, maybe the levels of depression or maybe personality affects how you handle depression.
Absolutely. There's people who are depressed and are going to work every single day. They are CEOs of big time companies. They are, billionaires. They are your people who are cleaning your offices, and everybody manifests depression differently. And then there's people who are depressed to the point that they can't even get out of bed in the morning. They're hospitalized. They can't move. Their depression is crippling them. So there are so many spectrums of depression. I recently had, I think, a lawyer in the hospital, right? And she's a lawyer, a district attorney in a county, and she was severely depressed to the point that she had to be hospitalized. And now this is somebody who's every day going to work, working 80 hours a week, and she's depressed. And then I had somebody recently who couldn't get out of bed. They weren't showering. They weren't brushing their teeth. That's another a spectrum of depression. There's women, mothers who drop their kids off every day, go to work, come home, feed the family, and they are suffering with depression. They're pursuing their goals. They're working great jobs and they're pursuing their goals, and they're not happy. Inside, like you said, they feel empty. Anthony Bourdain, I don't know if you guys remember him. He's the guy that was cooking and going all over the world and eating different foods. And he committed suicide. And as outsiders looking in, people are like, how could this person want to end their life? Because they have this money, they have family, they have everything you feel like you would need to be happy. And that just shows you that, that doesn't do it for them, So depression ranges from different spectrums.
So, talking about depression, because honestly, I'm just trying to get it's like cut clear. When someone is unhappy, is it different from, is it levels? Or does it mean that an experience, like we handle experiences differently? Because everybody is saying, oh, I'm depressed, and you can't really understand the difference. Maybe you're just unhappy because something happened, or because an event happened and it made the person really depressed, or the person is going through something at the moment and is really bothered but cannot handle what the person is going through. So how can we really, because I wouldn't, looking at you saying someone goes to work every day and is still depressed, and some people, something little happen and they are like depressedly depressed. So can you just explain, how do we know that it is not, how do we know that, okay, I'm unhappy, or okay, I'm really, really depressed, or I'm suffering from, loss or something, and it's just for the meantime? Yes. Can you please explain that?
Yeah, if if something happens to me tomorrow and I'm sad, that's different from a depression where I'm consistently so there's difference between down, having a bad day, feeling sad, than being depressed. But there's a question in the chat. I feel like they ask about abusers being narcissists. I don't have statistics that say all abusers are narcissists, but there's a lot of mental illness when it comes to people who are abusers. And again, that does not, it doesn't excuse their behavior. It means that they need help themselves. And there may not be narcissists. There's different types of personalities. There's bipolar, which I won't get into, but there's people who are suffering with bipolar. There's people who are depressed. And there's people who are actual narcissists or have traits of narcissism. So a lot of abusers have some traits, especially when they feel as though they can get over on their victims. And then there was also somebody who asked about seeing volunteers.
Which one are you reading? Oh,
so people who volunteer, who constantly see people who are suffering with domestic violence, and you see people going back to their abusers. And it's really hard, because you want the best for somebody. You want somebody to get out of the situation. Like I said earlier, you see that as an outsider looking in, you see them in a bad place, and you want to help them. And it's hard when you really badly are just like, you want to help them. And that's something that even myself, I struggle with. Because like I said, I work with people who abuse drugs and alcohol, and I work with people who are in domestic violence situations. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, it's so easy, just leave. But for them, they have to deal with their own inner self, and they have to be ready. And it's hard to say, but sometimes you have to sit with the fact that some people are not ready to receive the help that you're giving them. But always be available to give that help, if that makes sense, because it's very hard for a caregiver. It could be very hard. So you have to always be ready to give that person that help, because you never know when that person will be ready. It could be the 5th time, it could be the 8th time, it could be the 3rd time. So you always have to be ready with resources to give that person.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brenda. Someone says, my last question, my last relationship I felt was narcissist. Is it normal to have PTSD? She messed me up badly. I'm so ill now. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. The person that sent this question, I think you might have to reach out. Of course, Dr. Brenda will talk about that, but I really would want you to reach out to TouchLink. Yeah, you're in the right place, and of course, you would get help. That's, I know for sure. And this, are some of the resources, that you need. But you need other people to help you. You need to, someone to talk to you, and if that will make you feel better. But I don't know if Dr. Brenda understands this question. The person says, my last relationship I felt was narcissist. Is it normal to have PTSD? Dr. Brenda, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Narcissism is a personality, right? It's a personality disorder. And there's no medication I can give somebody for narcissism, right? I always say this, for your personality, for who you are as a person, you can't change that unless you're ready to change that. So narcissist people tend to have very abusive behavior, demeaning behavior, where they will make you feel as though you are at fault for a lot of the things that they're doing to you. And I feel like somebody spoke about this before, where, they will almost make you feel as though you are going crazy yourself. Like you'll wash dishes or something and they'll be like, but you didn't wash the dishes, but you know you did. And they will manipulate you into making you believe that you did something that you may not have done. And that type of psychological abuse requires treatment, and that could simply be therapy. And I really encourage you to reach out to the ladies at TouchLink to get resources for you, for your help, for your PTSD, for your from your abuse, because you need help right now.
Yeah, you can send an email to info@touchlink.org and someone would definitely reach out to you, because yes, you actually need resources and you need professionals, to handle, to help you. We have clear-cut help for everyone's situation. Emma says, I read a book by Lundy Bancroft that says all abusers aren't narcissists, but all narcissists are abusers or have abusive behavior. If you have questions, I think we can entertain one or two more questions. I think it's really, really, interactive. And I believe you're, picking up one or two things from tonight's mental health, training, as I would call it. And this was actually brought to you by TouchLink. It's an organization that the mission is to provide support to victims of domestic violence. And you don't have to be a victim of domestic violence to also create the awareness. So we are actually, we want you to come and join the team so we can create the awareness, so we can let people know. And we can also be self-aware so that when some things are happening, you can know that this is not right. Because it starts with, it starts with a lie, telling you a lie, making you believe a lie about yourself, right? But if you have the resources, if you know the truth, it will set you free. And you have to always, surround yourself with good communities, surround yourself with people who are enlightened, who know about this topic, who can help you, who can keep your secret, who would not, stigmatize you in any way, but would provide help to you in, every way that you want. Let's see, I think someone wrote something in the chat box. Thanks everyone for joining us. Okay, yeah, if we don't have any more question, I think it was actually a very good conversation tonight. Thank you very much, Dr. Brenda, for this detailed and insightful lecture about mental health. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Don't forget, reach out to somebody, invite someone to Saturday's meeting, and please register with us, on TouchLink. Go to www.touchlink.org, and please you can also donate towards the cause. You can donate to help people, and when you donate, you're donating towards a real good cause to help people who are suffering from domestic violence. Thank you so much, Dr. Brenda. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight. It was really good, having you around. Don't forget, join us on Saturday at noon for a panel discussion on self-care. Dr. Brenda talked about, self-care. We really have to take care of ourselves, because it's, it's our body. Our body embodies our spirit and our soul. And we really have to take care of ourselves so we can be in the right place to be able to face whatever, we're going through. So also don't forget to please like us on Facebook and YouTube at TouchLink, and be safe. Thank you so much, everyone. See you on Thursday at noon. Have a good evening, everyone.
See you on Saturday.
Okay,
thank you so much, Sister Busayo. Thank you, Dr. Brenda.